3535. Appearing first.
Great tribute for the state.
Morning, Theodore Edgecomb, appearing by Anik Ahmad.
And Attorney Bjarby Lamar.
All right, it's about 8:45. The jury's back. Mr. Hubner, who are you planning on calling this morning? Can you give me a... Right, I know, after that.
After that will be a detective who got a bullet, unless I can get it in through the ME, and then we'll probably be going to Ms. Clearman.
So 2 witnesses and then Mrs. Clearman?
Yeah.
All right. All right, I'm bringing the jury in. Everybody can remain seated. The defendant's in court, in custody, in street clothes. We'll bring the jury in. Yes, the jury's coming in. All right, the jury's back. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good evening. We're going to get right back to testimony. The medical examiner is still on the stand. If you can raise your right hand, be sworn in again, please.
You solemnly swear the testimony given in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Oh, you got it. Please be seated. Please tell me to stand first and last for the record, and you may remove your mask.
Thank you. My name is Philip Douglas Kelley, Philipkelley.
Doctor, where we had left off was at the, yesterday, was talking about the gunshot wound that the victim had received to the face. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the bullet that entered the victim's head was recovered inside his head. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Where was it recovered?
It was, according to the report, it was recovered under the scalp to the left back of the head.
And did you observe photos of where that bullet was recovered?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 44. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
This is the photo of the bullet that Dr. Smith took at the time of autopsy.
That's the bullet that was pulled from the victim's head. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
44. No problem. Doctor, just from looking at it, you yourself cannot tell us the caliber of that bullet, can you?
No, I cannot.
Okay. Now, additionally, doctor, you had mentioned that the victim had suffered other what appeared to be abrasions and scrapes consistent with potentially falling down. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'd like to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibits numbers 42, 43, 45, and 46. If you could take a look at those for me, tell me if you recognize them.
Yes, I recognize them.
What do they show?
These are photographs that were taken at autopsy that show the abrasions to the back of the left shoulder, to the back of the left hand, and to the upper left arm.
Could be consistent with the victim falling or something happening towards the left side of his body after being shot.
Yes, could be.
Showing you on the big screen, we see 42, which is the shoulder. Is that correct?
Yes.
43 is the left hand.
Yes.
45 is what?
45 is the left arm.
And is 46 kind of would draw a bigger photo of that?
Yeah. Yes.
Your Honor, the state would move State's Exhibits numbers 42 through 46 in evidence. I may have already moved in 44, but just to be certain.
No objection.
Received.
Additionally, doctor, was there toxicology results run on the victim?
There was.
Okay. Did he have alcohol in his system?
He did.
What was the blood alcohol level?
His blood alcohol concentration was 0.121 in the blood.
And did he have traces of THC in his system?
The screen was positive for THC metabolite. It would have to be confirmed in order for us to say for certain that that's a true result.
And was that done?
I'm sorry?
Was that done?
The confirmation, no. No, we didn't confirm the metabolite.
And the metabolite, can you tell us, is it possible to say how long that's in his system?
No, it's not.
So it could have been that night, could have been the night before, you don't know.
I don't. There was no THC, the tetrahydrocannabinol itself. It was the metabolite that was found in the screen again.
And again, just so we're talking about a metabolite, you're a doctor, I'm barely a lawyer. What does that mean?
It's a breakdown product. So drugs break down into other products, which then get removed from the body by the urine or other means.
So this is something that had been breaking down in his system.
That's correct.
You didn't see like we see the alcohol. This, don't know how long this one was in his system, but the body was breaking it down or absorbing it.
Right. I can't even, without confirming it, I can't even tell you that it's a true result.
You can't even tell us right now, based on your expert opinion, that it in fact was THC.
That's correct.
Okay. But he did have alcohol, right?
He did.
Okay. And that was at a 0.12.
Correct.
Okay. Now, doctor, based on everything we have discussed, based on your autopsy, all of these findings, based on the autopsy that you observed, the photos, the notes, the diagrams, the report, was this enough for you to be able to come to a conclusion as to the cause and manner of death?
Yes.
Are these the sorts of facts and data that someone in your field as a forensic pathologist would use to come to a conclusion as to cause and manner of death?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So first of all, what was your conclusion as to the cause of the victim's death?
The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head.
Okay. What was your conclusion as to the manner of the victim's death?
The manner is homicide.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross.
Thank you, Judge. All right, good morning,
Good morning.
Dr. Kelley. Just had some follow-up questions for you. And we went through some of your testimony yesterday, just kind of educating all of us about the science behind medical examinations and autopsies. So I just want to recap a few topics. Now, just to be clear in this case, as you said, you didn't actually physically conduct the autopsy on the morning of September 23rd, 2020, right?
That's correct.
That was Dr. Smith?
Correct.
Okay. And there are other medical examiners besides you and Dr. Smith at the ME's office here in Milwaukee?
Yes.
Just approximately how many?
Oh, there are 5 of us in the office now. Dr. Smith has moved on to another office.
Okay, so he's no longer with the office?
That's correct.
Now, normally, would you testify as to your own autopsy, or do you fill in for other examiners?
Normally, I testify to my own autopsies as well, but when necessary, somebody has to fill in.
Okay. So, obviously, you didn't have the opportunity to inspect or examine Mr. Clearman's body, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So we were talking yesterday about what you had reviewed. If you could just recap for us, you reviewed the photographs in this case, right?
Yes.
And you reviewed the autopsy report that Dr. Smith had drafted. Is that
That's right.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, the autopsy report, the toxicology, the photographs, as you mentioned, and, and then the investigator's report.
The investigator's report?
Yeah, our investigator's report.
Do you remember who the investigator was?
I don't. We have investigators, and they respond to scenes and take some photographs and document the scene, examine the body at the scene. So those things are put in the report. So it gives us a synopsis of what was seen by them at the scene.
Okay, now yesterday we were talking about things such as range. I believe you had mentioned that in this case, your opinion was that the gunshot was fired from an intermediate range. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So let's kind of break that down a bit. In your field, is it fair to say that things are categorized in, when it comes to gunshot ranges, in 3 different categories?
In several categories, not necessarily 3, but there's obviously contact range, there's close contact and tight contact, there's intermediate range, and then there's the indeterminate range we talked about.
Okay, can you just kind of give us an overview of the different ranges that there are when it comes to estimating distance when a firearm is discharged?
Sure. The contact range, which we'll just put that in one category. A contact range means that the skin is in contact with the surface of the muzzle, and so there are certain features that we would look for in those types of cases, including abrasions to the skin. Sometimes it actually will create an abrasion that mimics the characteristics of the muzzle. So it's a muzzle stamp, if you will, and it actually can be a very close copy of the muzzle. You can look at the end of the muzzle, and it looks just like what you see in the abrasion on the skin. Then as you get a little further away, you'll see some soot to the skin, maybe the beginnings of intermediate range, but when you or gunpowder stippling. But when you see gunpowder stippling, that's when we call that an intermediate range gunshot wound. And that means that, as I said before, that can start even as close as a half an inch and can extend out for several feet. Beyond that, there's nothing that hits the skin that gives us any clue as to the distance, and so we just call those indeterminate range.
Okay, so indeterminate range is something that exceeds intermediate range. Is that fair to say?
That's true.
And generally speaking, I believe you said that the maximum range when it comes to intermediate range would be maybe up to 4 feet.
In general, handguns, the gunpowder doesn't have enough energy to create the scrapes on the skin or embed in the skin beyond about 4 feet.
And we were looking at a photo yesterday. I believe it was Exhibit 47, Counsel? Specifically referring to the photograph that we had observed. Exhibit 47, just to refresh everyone's memory. So, these dots here that we see at the top of Exhibit 47, this is what you were referring to as stippling, right?
It is. This is the edge. This is a much more dense pattern when you look at the front of the face around the wound itself.
Okay, so it is a dense pattern. My question about that is, so just so we can kind of understand from our common experiences, so stippling is basically, if you could just describe again to us what that is.
Certainly. So as I said, the gunpowder that leaves the barrel of the gun, it's traveling with some speed and therefore with some energy. when it hits the skin, if it has enough energy to actually scrape the skin or to embed in the skin, it'll create these little punctate or pinpoint or slightly elongated abrasions or scrapes, and we refer to those as gunpowder stippling.
Okay, so it's kind of just, if you were to think of it kind of like as a spray that comes from the gun.
Yes.
So let's say I had a spray can, like a paint can, and if I was holding it very close to, let's say, a wall or any other flat surface, there'd be a denser pattern, and then as I moved that spray can backwards, it would kind of disperse into a more larger area, right?
That's right.
So it's kind of just like a spray can or a paint can that we use in common experience, the same kind of concept, right?
Same general concept, yeah.
Okay. So if there's a denser pattern, it would be consistent with something being much closer, and if it's a more sparse or spread out pattern, then it would be consistent with it being farther, right?
That's right.
Okay. And you're aware that Dr. Smith's opinion in this case was about this being from 2 to 3 inches to 2 feet, right?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
The intermediate range being 2 to 3 inches to up to 2 feet in this specific case.
And who said that?
Dr. Smith?
No, I'm not aware of any comments Dr. Smith gave.
Okay, so you weren't aware of that. But as far as your opinion in this case, I believe you said intermediate range could be anywhere from, I believe you said 1/2 inch to 4 feet?
Yeah, as I said yesterday, I'm being conservative about this because, you know, certainly you can see a little bit of gunpowder stippling with some gunshot wounds even at 1/2 inch away. But obviously it becomes a little more concentrated when you get a few inches away. But the 4 feet is, again, a generalization. We just know that handguns, the gunpowder leaving a handgun doesn't have as much energy as you get out around that range. And testing of some of these weapons has shown that it dissipates completely by 3.5 feet or so. So my conservative answer was that this is within 4 feet.
Okay. And you wouldn't see any pattern after 3.5 feet, generally speaking?
They would dissipate to the point where, as I said, they would dissipate to the point where you wouldn't see these injuries to the skin. You know, it would scatter, and there would be so few that you wouldn't see any.
Okay. Now, in your review of the autopsy protocol that was authored by Dr. Smith, you were able to determine certain facts you had to rely on that report, right?
Yes, I relied on that report.
Such as Mr. Clearman was, do you remember what his weight was?
Yes, he was 250 pounds.
And the height?
I believe he was 75 inches, 6 foot 3 inches.
Okay. And I'm going to show you what's marked as Defense Exhibit 13. I'm going to introduce what's marked as Defense Exhibit 12. You tell us you recognize this.
Yes, I do.
Okay, and can you tell us what it is, Doctor?
This is a copy of the toxicology report on the deceased.
Okay, and you had reviewed that as part of your work in this case, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Permission to publish, Judge?
Go ahead.
Well, for what purpose?
Well, I have some questions about the blood alcohol concentration. I mean, this is a business record. It should be.
They don't need to see that. That's not going to illuminate anything. No. Ask the questions. They don't need to see a document like that. That's just a bunch of numbers that are not going to make sense to the jury anyways. No, denied. Ask the questions.
All right, well, I'm going to hand you this exhibit, Doctor. Hand it back to you. So, you were referring to the blood alcohol concentration. And what was the blood alcohol blood alcohol concentration that was Mr. Clearman's blood at the time of the autopsy?
It was 0.121.
Now, in that document, are there two different blood alcohol concentrations that are measured?
The other blood alcohol concentration that you're seeing there is the vitreous fluid, which is from within the eye.
Okay.
Say that again, Doctor.
Oh.
Say that more clearly and, no offense, a little more articulately so that all of us common people can get it.
Sorry, Your Honor. That's the fluid from within the eye.
Okay. And they're about the same, right?
Yes, they are.
So one indicates vitreous blood alcohol concentration, and the other one, which is the other one? How is that pronounced?
One is vitreous and the other is blood, iliac blood
Iliac.
specifically.
Can you spell those, Doctor?
Certainly. ILIAC.
And the other one that starts with a V?
The other one is VITREOUS.
Thank you.
Okay, so what's the difference between those two? You said vitreous is something that's extracted from the eye, and from my understanding, that's like a gel-like fluid, right?
It's thicker, yes. The difference is we collect both those specimens routinely. We collect both the specimens routinely. Obviously, the blood is tested generally for all substances. The vitreous fluid, what's useful about the alcohol level in the vitreous is that the body equilibrates between the vitreous and the blood. In other words, substances in the blood, basically take a couple of hours, 1 or 2 hours to equilibrate or to match what's in the blood. And so you can kind of think of the vitreous as a look back an hour or two. So, for instance, if we were to see that the vitreous level is much higher than the blood level, that would tell us that the blood alcohol is on its way down, that it was higher previously. If it's lower, it tells us that the alcohol level is on its way up. So these are about the same. So they're basically that just tells us that, well, it tells us that they're the same. It tells us that the blood alcohol level is a 0.12 at the time of death.
Okay, so when someone unfortunately dies or passes away, well, let me back up. So normally, blood alcohol, right, is absorbed through the body, and then as time progresses, the body can eliminate that, and people basically can sober up, right?
Yes, the body metabolizes alcohol, begins metabolizing alcohol immediately.
And how does the body metabolize it? Like, what organs are used to do that?
It's metabolized in the liver.
Okay. And just a small percentage might be through like sweat or urine or breath, things like that, right?
Yeah, a small amount can be lost in the urine, for instance, yeah.
But I'm going to just take a guess here, doctor. So when someone passes away, though, this was my original question, the body's elimination rate, if you could just educate us on, is there any sort of dissipation of alcohol after death? And if so, how long does that last until the body just ceases to function?
I think I understand your question. After death, the alcohol level is actually pretty stable. Once a person decomposes, the story is different, but this obviously isn't that type of case. But until you start seeing decomposition, those alcohol levels are pretty reliable.
Okay, so the 0.12 would have likely been very accurate as the BAC at the time Mr. Clearman died. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, as far as the THC, that was some trace amount, I believe you said it was a metabolite.
It's a metabolite, so it's a breakdown product of THC. The fact it was picked up on our screen, it means that we detected that substance on the screen, but in order for it to be confirmed, we would have had to run an additional test. But since it's a metabolite, we didn't run a confirmation on this case.
Okay, so there's really no way to determine when that THC, if it was consumed, when it would have been consumed?
That's correct.
Now, are you familiar with, just generally speaking, the amount of alcohol that individuals consume that, and excuse me, in terms of drinks that can result in a certain blood alcohol concentration level?
I would have to brush up on that. I'm not real, my memory's not that good. Sorry.
So you're not as familiar with blood alcohol concentrations, like, you know, if someone weighs this much and they had this many drinks, what their likely BAC would have been?
I'm not able to calculate that for you right now, no.
Okay. All right. And then you were telling us about cause of death and manner of death. So you said cause of death was a gunshot to the head, right?
Correct.
And then manner of death, you said was a homicide, as in that just refers to someone else had shot the weapon that had killed or shot the gun that discharged the bullet that resulted in the death of Mr. Clearman, right?
That's correct.
As in it wasn't a suicide or anything like that.
That's correct.
And that, of course, has nothing to do with whether it was in self-defense or not in self-defense, right?
No, it has nothing to do with that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Nothing further.
State.
Nothing, thank you.
You can step down, doctor. Thank you. Who's the state's next witness?
State calls Detective Sullivan.
This matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please be seated, state your full name, spelling first and last.
Jeffrey Sullivan, Jeffrey, Sullivan, Sullivan.
Detective, how are you employed? You can remove your mask too.
I'm a detective with the Milwaukee Police Department assigned to the Homicide Division.
How long have you been with Homicide?
About 8 years.
I want to draw your attention specifically to the homicide of Jason Cleereman that occurred on September 22nd of 2020. Were you involved in that investigation?
Yes.
And did there come a time that you were at the medical examiner's office for a reason?
Yes, the next day.
And what was the purpose of that?
To monitor the autopsy of the victim.
And what is the purpose of having a detective monitoring the autopsy?
To make note of any visible injuries on the deceased, to recover any evidence from the deceased given to us by the doctor.
And would that include any projectiles or bullets or anything that may have been recovered from inside the victim's body?
Yes.
In this case, regarding Mr. Clearman's autopsy, Were you present when something was removed from inside his head?
I was.
What was that?
The doctor removed a projectile from the back of the victim's head during the autopsy and ultimately gave it to me.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 50. I'd ask you to take a look at it. Tell me if you recognize it.
This appears to be the envelope that I packaged the projectile in, and it indicates the same grain that I recovered, so the doctor gave to me during the autopsy.
All right, and Detective, just going to kind of look a little bit at the top of the exhibit. Is there anything else there?
It's a projectile, a bullet.
Okay, so this has both the envelope as well as the actual projectile that was removed from the victim's head.
Yes.
Does this have all the hallmarks, notations, initials, inventory numbers that let us know that you were the person who took this from the ME's office and inventoried it?
Yes.
And does this packaging let us know that this was later looked at by the crime lab?
Yes.
Your Honor, State moves State's Exhibit number 50 in evidence. I have no further questions of this witness.
Received. Any cross?
Yes. Good morning, Detective.
Morning.
Just a couple questions. So you were present when the autopsy was conducted along with Dr. Smith, right?
Yes.
I mean, obviously, you were able to testify about the casing. So in your investigation, you also learned that the gunshot was fired from an intermediate range, right?
I learned that through speaking with the doctor.
Okay, you also learned as part of your investigation that the estimate was anywhere from 2 to 3 inches to 2 feet, correct?
Your words are 2 to 3 inches. I think it's several inches to 2 feet, yes.
Okay, several inches to up to 2 feet, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you had written a report about that and filed that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, nothing further. Thank you.
Nothing else, thank you.
Fine.
You can step down, Detective. Who's the State's next witness?
Your Honor, the State will call Ms. Clearman. If, can we potentially just take a small break while we get our next witness down here?
Yes, we can take 5 or 10 minutes. I'll have my bailiffs lead the jury out. Everyone else is to remain seated and not move until the jury is excused. All right, 10-minute recess, off the record.